I'm autistic. I'm very recently diagnosed. I have been diagnosed with ADHD for a couple of years. This video is a collage kind of thing of a bunch of different times when I sat down to digest kind of some of what the diagnostic process has been like for me in terms of kind of my own identity and how I understand myself, how I fit into the world. And a lot of that has flavors of what I'm calling like autistic imposter syndrome. And when I say autistic imposter syndrome, I literally mean imposter syndrome, but like applied to autism, right? So imposter syndrome, a psychological experience of chronic self-doubt and feeling like a fraud despite evidence of success or competence, or like evidence of traits or diagnostic criteria meeting, I guess. So I will be in and out in various settings at different points in time to unpack different thoughts and elements as they've come to me. And my thinking, due to the ADHD, can be very tangential and go in the direction that it's going. And I've kind of tried to just embrace that rather than fight that, because it's the way that I think the best. So this video might be a little bit less perfectly structured in like a 1, 2, 3 kind of way, but hopefully it is still useful to somebody. So the first bit I'm wanting to unpack a little bit is the dynamic of being around neurodivergent people all of your life. Probably, at least I'm speaking for me, obviously, but like I think it's a lot of people's experience that the people that they're related to, so like the first people when they initially came into the world and looked around and were like, what's normal? Whatever these people are doing, that the first people I saw, whatever they're doing is probably normal. So like this is my understanding of what normal is in the world. So that having a home base that is already a little bit different from what might be like a neurotypical standard to compare to. And then also, obviously, a lot of neurodivergent people are drawn to social circles filled with other neurodivergent people. So at a couple different levels, there's like this confusing dynamic of often running into challenge in structural ways or ways that are like related to society and the standards that you're supposed to be upholding and living to and all of the norms, but having like an not normative norm that is the norm in your life, if that makes sense. And a lot of social circles that I think are heavily populated, maybe even like primarily populated by neurodivergent people, where it feels truly like I know that these are kind of minority experiences within the population of everyone who exists and is navigating the world. But in terms of the people I know, the people I talk to, the people I hang out with, the experiences that I have that are related to my neurodivergence truly feel more like the dominant experience than not. Like it just feels like something everybody I know relates to. And I think that has been a sticky point in getting me to the place where I'm actually taking myself seriously. I think that can be a really normalizing experience, but it can also be really frustrating and almost stigmatizing in like a strange backwards way. Even coming to the realization that I care about and want to prioritize getting officially diagnosed in the first place has been challenging, because it feels like if everybody I know is like this, why can't I just get on with things? If the majority of the experiences that I'm seeing are representative of these dynamics of myself, and these are other people who are just having their lives, having adult jobs, being able to function and have hobbies. I'm sorry to keep using the word function, but like it's the only word that's coming up, and it literally, I feel like I can't function so much. So whatever. I have to say that a big part of this process is inherently about coming into contact with a lot of internalized ableism and how that shows up against yourself, but also realizing it's probably stuff that you've been not realizing and operating with like your whole life. And a lot of that does show up in the language that I use. Like I think I reach for functioning a lot because it's just the thing that fills that space in the sentence that reflects how I feel. But I don't mean to put low support needs as like the ideal to aspire to, or being able to conduct yourself in like an adult job. I keep saying adult job, but it's because it's the thing that I feel alienated from, that even when I am doing what I see as an adult job, I feel so othered or alienated, or like I'm cosplaying, or like I'm barely holding it together enough to be continuing to do that. So it's weird. I get like imposter syndrome when I am performing the way that is like normatively expected, and then I also get imposter syndrome by being like, hey, maybe I'm not what I have been pretending to look like, and maybe there's more going on beneath the surface here. To be a little bit generous to myself here, autistic imposter syndrome is like inherently, I think, something that would be more associated with higher masking autistic people, because the whole imposter syndrome thing, I think, is about feeling like you're not autistic enough, or you don't present autistically enough, or you're not stereotypical enough that other people who mostly probably don't know that much about ASD would be able to identifiably know that you're autistic or something. Like, I think it is inherently a higher masking, maybe lower support needs experience. So yeah, like, obviously this is my experience. I don't know. I'm speaking for myself. We know this. But yeah, like, acknowledging that's not what I am intentionally saying is like the ideal, to be low support needs, to be able to fit into a neurotypical mainstream expectation of what life looks like and what functioning looks like in an adult life. But what I'm trying to draw attention to is the comparison is really challenging when it feels like everybody acknowledges that there are different neurotypes and there are different struggles that come with that. But when it's so normalized like that, it often does become a little bit of like a strengths-based thing because, you know, the highlight reel thing of social media, there's been enough stigmatization. We don't want to keep focusing on the ways in which people's lives are impacted in challenging ways by these like conditions. So I know people who get frustrated by disability labels and like don't want that put on them. But like, for me, for somebody who has never been seen kind of in that light and with that amount of understanding, it feels very empowering to be like, hey, these are disabilities, can we get some understanding? And I can understand that for somebody who has inescapably been seen through that lens their entire life and has probably been, you know, infantilized and disempowered through that labeling system, it would be frustrating. Anyway, I think I'd appreciate some understanding because this is all stuff I'm trying to navigate and take apart kind of like in real time, trying to figure out how I fit into it whilst like educating myself more and realizing how much I didn't know all along. Like, I thought I was pretty down and up to date in terms of like a lot of these social dynamics and stuff, and like realizing how much I had unknowingly absorbed my entire life. So again, asking, I guess, for a little bit of grace when I say not the perfect thing, and know that it's not what I'm intending to be the finished state of what I think or believe about the world, and yet like these are the things that are at play, and it's hard to figure out how you fit within all of them, especially when you're trying to be speaking perfectly about everything all the time and not hurting anyone's feelings, because like, God forbid, that's the last thing I want to do. So maybe 3 years or 3.5 years ago, when I first told my mom that I thought I had ADHD, she kind of laughed, and not like in a mean way, but she was just like, yeah, kid, I think you've been online a bit too much. Like, I don't really think that's an issue. And yeah, that was a really interesting conversation, and actually like a series of conversations, right? Because so many things that I was like, well, here are my reasons, this and this and this. Here's the stuff that I navigate that I found challenging in my life that leads me to believe I might have ADHD, and I would like to talk to a professional about that. As my mom realized that I actually really cared about it, she did take it more seriously, and she was willing to engage in those conversations. But a lot of it did kind of come back around to, those are normal experiences. Like, I do that. Like, I don't really know what to tell you. Like, I love you. I want you to feel supported, but like, I don't really see what you're seeing. I don't really agree that that's a thing. But like, I'm willing to talk to the psychiatrist about, you know, your childhood experiences and how you presented when you were younger, if that's something that matters to you. And so she did, and I got diagnosed. And what makes it funny is the retrospect of her now having been diagnosed like a month or two ago. There's been a lot of parental figures in my life, but 2 of them are now officially diagnosed. One is officially diagnosed by me. I truly don't think that he ever needs to see a professional. Like, I have diagnosed him with both autism and ADHD. It seems like the most obvious thing in the entire world, based both on having a single conversation with him and also looking at 5 minutes of his life history, right? It's not subtle. So that's not officially diagnosed, but there's also the life path editing process, I think, that happens when you struggle with what is traditionally expected, conventionally expected out of you as a life path. So many things that I have done in my life, I have done in a really non-traditional, non-conventional way. I dropped out of school after 7th grade. I did circus full-time instead. I did a thing called unschooling. It was something that my parents and I talked about, and we ultimately decided it was the right thing for me to do because of how much I was struggling in traditional school. If I hadn't had that option, if I had less understanding parents, and I had stayed in traditional school, been pushed to graduate high school and do that whole long drawn-out process, I think that my struggles would have been a lot more evident a lot earlier on, and potentially I would have gotten diagnosed diagnosed or had a bit more support earlier on. And I'm not saying that I wish that had happened. I'm not saying that that was the bad thing to do. In many ways, it was supportive even before any of us had any words or language for what was going on. Like, that is very much a privilege, and I'm very lucky to have had accepting, open-minded parents who made those changes for me to make my life work for me as the kid that I was. But what I'm getting to is the fact that your life can change in this undercover kind of way, such that you avoid the obstacles that might put your struggles into like really clear HD. I don't know. I imagine most people who are clicking on this video are not neurotypical people who don't identify with, you know, these experiences or this journey, or, you know, just looking to poke holes in the logic of what I'm saying, I guess. But I can imagine someone hearing these things and going, okay, so like, what's the big deal? If you're surrounded by a bunch of people, both in your family and your social circle, like everybody who you ever spend time with is the same neurotype to you and thus like has understanding for your challenges, and there's like a shared language there, and there's not necessarily stigmatization happening, and you're able to accommodate for yourself in the ways that are possible, and, you know, find a job that is the most accessible for you and avoid extremely mainstream schooling situations. Like, what's the big deal, basically? If you can make all these changes to your life and basically be getting along fine. I'm trying to avoid this, like, explicit print being in shot, because I don't know if that's an issue or not. And, like, to an extent, yes, like, that's true. This is one place where I would say it is nice that we live in a very individualistic society in terms of like Western culture, at least. There is a lot of space for people making up the lives and the lifestyles that work for all of us individually, and that's great and dandy. But also, we can't actually avoid like the powers that be and interacting with like the structural situation of the world and the really confusing situation between having ease in these arenas of life that are so neurodivergence affirming and accommodating arenas, and like interaction with the structure and the way that the world works that is not for neurotypes like ours or like mine. And that shit's so confusing, right? Because that's where you get the thing where you're around your friends and you're like, I don't know, I seem to socialize fine, not realizing that you're all just like autistic weirdos that just have the same social language, and then showing up in, I don't know, like a college lecture space and not being able to track what is going on in a lecture that's like really logically easy to understand, but because the light is buzzing, you can't actually, you're not in the room. It's this really confusing duality between like, there's clearly nothing going on here. I'm just like everyone else. I can just make adjustments for what I need. I am just an individual person who has challenges like everybody else. And then actually, I am fundamentally mismade for like getting along with like what adult life requires of me. Am I experiencing challenge in a neurotypical way? Because autistic traits are human traits, and of course they're like things that a lot of people are going to relate to. It's like about severity and, you know, being past a clinical line of those things. So like, just because you occasionally struggle to get started on a homework assignment you don't really want to do doesn't necessarily mean that you have the executive functioning challenges that would qualify to be over the clinical line of ADHD. Like, there's a very different thing between occasionally relating to these experiences and clinically dysfunctionally having them impact your life. And that's a really confusing space to be sorting through. I mean, I've been diagnosed for like just over a month. You know, it's very fresh. I'm not going to try and act as though I'm at the end of my journey. Even now that I have a diagnosis and I have doctor's approval, official stamp, cha-ching, that wasn't a stamp sound, but like I have that official validation of it is not your fault, you are not broken, legitimately just have a different type of brain that the world was not built for. And I know that can technically give myself permission to be the way that I am and have the life that I have and feel the way that I feel and be as sensitive as I fucking am in the world. Despite all of that, and knowing that it is not my fault that the world is built for one specific neurotype that does not fit much of what humanity actually is like, it's still a hard pill to swallow to put the blame on that when you can't actually control that. And it's a hard pill to swallow to go, okay, there's nothing wrong with me, I just have a different kind of brain, and that's hard for my life experience, but like I can acknowledge that it's actually a structural problem going on here. Psychologically, it's just hard to not blame yourself, right? Because I can't actually change the way that the world works. And although I can't actually change the structure of my brain, it feels like that's the thing that's more attainable. And that the inner critic just takes that and runs with it, right? I can't change the world, but I can change myself to fit into the world. Or at least that's what the thinking is. But I just wanted to draw attention to that structural level and the polarity here between like, why is it easy sometimes? Why is it so fucking hard sometimes? If it can be easy, why does it have to be a problem? And like the push and pull with all of that, while acknowledging that I'm not gonna fix it. And I'm gonna come back to the individual journey because that's the part that I actually do have some level of influence on, I guess. Right, so all of those tangents are my brain's way of kind of establishing the foundations of where we're coming from. And moving on from there, I think there are some like actual kind of clear step-by-step things in the mechanism of this like autistic imposter syndrome that I want to unpack a little bit. The first level of which is literally having language for a thing that you have just never had language for before. There's a reason that a lot of autistic people prefer being called autistic people rather than people with autism or people that have autism, because that is the kind of person you are, right? You are an autistic person. You aren't like a person that is separate from your autism, that's just like a thing you struggle with. That is the kind of person that you are. That is the way that you interact with and see the world, the way that you experience the world. It is a filter on every aspect of your experience since you've been born. And every single aspect, from your personality to every little quirk that you just thought was a little weird thing that you've never even talked about with anybody else or even like thought twice about, is suddenly comes into clarity with the understanding of something that was going on the entire time is such like a shining example of, and you finally have a word for it. Now, something that happens when you finally have language for stuff that you've never had language for before, you realize that things are not just random, unconnected bits of your personality. They're actually data points in like an interconnected web of information that outlines your neurotype. I think there's a very normal process of going through and categorizing like a lifetime of experiences that suddenly you're seeing through this new frame, and it's a lot to reprocess. I will give you an example. When I was a kid, I hated saying please. So like picture me at the dinner table. I want the salt. I say, can I have the salt? Somebody hands me the salt and I say thank you. Like it always felt comfortable to say thank you because I was grateful that they opted to help me with the thing that I asked them to help with. But I always hated saying please because I hated people saying please to me. Like for me to say, can you pass the salt? It felt like an authentic question, like, hey, would you do this? Or like, would you mind passing the salt even? Like a genuine question that somebody could reject if they didn't want to do it. It felt like the nice way to phrase it. But as soon as I add a please onto the end, can I please have the salt? Or can I have the salt please? It felt like just a polite way of like making kind of an order seem more socially normal to do. And I hated that. Like I hated if anybody said please to me because it felt like being ordered around, and it felt like just like a polite word to tack on to being rude, kind of like just telling somebody what to do and expecting that they'll do it just because you said this word. And so like there were a few times that people were like, hey, you have to say please, that's rude. And again, I wasn't trying to be rude. I was trying to genuinely ask for something I wanted in a way that somebody would hopefully feel free to not do if they didn't want to do. And I was trying to make them feel free from the tyranny of please that I felt. I felt that saying please felt tyrannical, and I was trying to free them from that. I didn't want them to feel that pressure, and so I didn't say it. Eventually, enough people corrected me and told me that it was rude that I just started doing it. I probably do it habitually now, like out and about or in social situations, but when I'm at home with my partner, believe I'm not saying please. It just sounds rude to me. Now, as an adult who's in the process of realizing I'm an autistic person who has very significant PDA, pathological demand avoidance, for people who are not familiar with the acronym, that's the most shining example of PDA I have ever heard of. And like, to me previously, this was just like a slight quirk. I just thought it was like a weird opinion that I had about this weird thing that nobody else thought about. Like I had never verbalized it to anybody. I haven't thought about it in years. And yet, when I was going through the process of catalyzing all the stuff that made me autistic for my upcoming diagnosis, that just popped into my head randomly. And I have not been able to get over it because it is something that just felt so benignly a part of who I am and just a random opinion I had. And yet it is such a shining example of my neurodivergence in such like a benign way. So again, back to this point, you have language for things you never had language for. I thought I had this weird quirk about the word please, and now I come to discover that it's actually a point of my PDA and my autism. Like, that is such a tiny, tiny piece of who I am. Again, I haven't thought about that example in years. And yet there are a billion thousand things about me in my life like that. And yet all of it can be contextualized in such clarity with the understanding of my autism in mind. And that fact alone, the fact that you have this model for understanding and contextualizing your behavior, yourself, your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, the fact that you have language for those things now makes it feel like you are so much more autistic in the present, because now if I don't say please to something, I notice it. I'm hyper aware of every point of my autism because I've been trying to chronicle them for a doctor to validate. So I'm hyper aware of them, but also they were things that were always there. I just now have this connective tissue that I never saw before that I finally recognize. And that's a lot. That's crazy. It's awesome. It's a lot to process, and it can make you feel like there's so much more autism than there ever was before. Look at this cute little guy. My sidekick. So yeah, with the new self-understanding, you've woken up into a new world, a new life where you see nothing but autism everywhere. And it's a lot going on. This is something I hear so commonly from people who have like a new diagnosis or a new realization about any kind of neurodivergence. I hear it so frequently that people are like, I feel so much more ADHD than I did before. I feel so much more autistic than I did before. And it is because you have words for it, because you're aware of it, and you're trying to unpack more of your experience and understand yourself more. And I also think it's related to the unmasking process that comes with diagnosis or realization. Not that everybody necessarily unmasks, but I do think that there's like a deconstruction of the mask, trying to take that apart and understand how it fits into your identity. Like, what aspects of yourself are genuine, are authentic, what things are organic, and what things are learned or performed or things that you've been conditioned over time to realize that people just respond well to. And it's not that you're necessarily lying, but it's just the thing that will serve you best to get along socially, to just do that and to model that quality. And I think that process does slow down and shift over time, because, not to get existential with it, but like ultimately what even is yourself and what is authentic. Like, I kind of think all action ultimately is kind of just a result of causes and conditions. Like, we inherently are different people in different settings, and that's not that that's like a lie or fake, but it is just true that we have to present differently and we have to bring out different aspects of ourselves differently in different settings to get along. Like, that is just the way that we have to do things to get along in the world. Even neurotypical people, particularly people of color, particularly different minority groups, talk about double consciousness and code switching, and I think those are elements that are at play here as well. And for various minority groups, I think it's a more extreme version that feels really clunky because it has been put onto people through a system of oppression, and it's kind of more of a survival-based thing rather than something that feels like it's just a positive tool to utilize to maneuver throughout the world. And I'm trying not to get lost in the weeds here, but like basically what I'm saying is that serves a purpose, and there's probably not some perfect unedited version of yourself that you're going to be able to find underneath everything. Maybe that's just me personally, because even when I'm alone, I feel like I can't not perform for like almost the invisible camera that I imagine is living in my head or seeing me through the keyhole kind of thing. I'm trying so hard not to get lost in the weeds of like male gaze and all of these different elements. But they are so related. You can't deny that they're not related. Masking is a useful tool that has gotten you through life to this point. And I think once you come out the other side of the deconstruction, I do think you can find your way back into a kind of organic use of it that might feel slightly less clunky. At least that is what I tell myself, because I really hope that it eventually feels less like a mental juggling act all the time. And for us autistic people, socializing already feels kind of like a juggling act with way too many balls in the air. And then that level of self-analysis of the mask in the moment of, is this organic? Is this what I would naturally say? No, yes, maybe it's not. Oh, now I'm trying to be more authentically myself, but because I'm trying really hard to say the thing that I feel like is the authentic thing for me to say and is the genuine response that I would give if I were talking to myself, now it feels off again because I'm just extremely aware of it. Now, I might just be a person who is like debilitatingly self-aware, and I can acknowledge that, but I have also heard multiple people describe some strain of what I'm describing now to be part of their process of unmasking. And when all this is what's happening in your head, I think it gives the inner critic a lot to play ball with. Little tangent again, but for me personally, I find that I have this like inner conservative voice that is often the way that the inner critic kind of manifests for me. And I'll just be like going about my life trying to live the best life that I can, and like this inner voice is like calling me like an SJW for wanting something that's very reasonable to want, or like wanting equity in some extremely reasonable and like small way. And in this conversation, I think it's kind of hard not to acknowledge the elements of the online conversation around autism, unmasking, neurodivergence in general. There is a big culture of toxicity, of like fake claiming, of not believing people. Have a look at r/fake disorder cringe if you don't believe me, except for really don't look at that because it's brain rot and it's disgusting, and you'll think that you can look at it and just laugh at how ridiculous people are, that this is what they spend their time doing. But then you'll find yourself in the middle of the night with an inner conservative voice calling you fake for having a meltdown. I don't know. It's a lot. That voice that is conditioned by those circumstances and those narratives online, for me, talks a lot about how I'm not actually autistic. I'm seeming more autistic now that this is something that I'm thinking about. And we have covered why I feel more autistic now than previously. Like, I have language for things, so I understand things better. I understand how things are related to my autism, and I'm like actually listening to myself more about my sensory needs and all of those things, right? So we understand why I feel more autistic, but that voice goes, you feel more autistic because you're trying to give yourself autism, because you're trying to conjure up reasons why you're autistic just because you want to get validation for the self-diagnosis that you've just decided that you have. And you're not autistic, you don't look autistic, you don't seem like somebody who has those experiences. Nobody will believe you. The couple times that you have mentioned to somebody that you have an official diagnosis, they have said, oh, but you don't seem autistic, or oh, but you seem so high functioning. And they said those things because you're not autistic and you don't deserve to have your diagnosis validated. That is what the voice says. Tofu, I'm trying to have dialogue with my inner conservative voice. Can you please? Okay, all right. That's how I feel about the inner conservative voice as well, to be fair. And it's just a lot going on, right? Like, I don't know how to reconcile any of that or fix it or make it better. I'm just trying to kind of catalog, I guess, what this experience is like. But it does often bait me into like an inner tug of war in the middle of a social situation where I'm already stressed out, where I'm already additionally juggling like an extra layer of self-awareness and analysis because I'm so aware of how my autism fits into this situation. But then I'm also in this tug of war with this inner voice where it's saying that I'm not actually experiencing the thing that I'm really experiencing, and I'm saying, what would I even have to gain from like pretending to be having sensory sensitivities that I don't actually have, or pretending to have like social misfunctioning, I guess, like that I don't actually have. Like, what? Why would I do that? Why would I do that? Make it make sense. It doesn't make sense. There's nothing that I could say to that voice that would make it go away. It's just like, it just is. It just is there. It just exists. And yes, this does just kind of sound like a conversation for my therapist, but I think it's actually really, really relevant here, because I think that fundamentally it is a part of the mask. Like, what has the mask done for your entire life? It has protected you, or tried to protect you, from being perceivably different. And it has done that largely by policing your behavior, and through this like hyper extreme level of self-awareness and self-analysis in every moment in social situations. So when you become aware of that process and try and take it apart and examine it and kind of decide what parts are actually useful to you that you would like to keep utilizing in like a skillful way occasionally when you need it, I think inherently that part of yourself that sees any element of your neurodivergence being seen by somebody else, being perceivably remotely different by somebody else, that part of yourself has a really survival level panic and fear about that being perceived. And so I think that the self-criticism there is really just that part trying to protect you. And I know it's kind of like a bit of an annoying thing to say, because it's like, okay, great, you're just yelling at me and making me cry. Like, that's not helpful to me. But I kind of think we do have to come with some understanding of where that element of yourself is coming from, because it is a part of yourself. It is trying to do something that it thinks is fundamental to your survival. And I think that we need to understand that in order to come to any level of peace with that being a part of our experience. One of the last things I want to say about this is that I think a predominant way in which this masking process backfires in the process of kind of deconstructing it is that the self-distrust that has been such a main element of masking for our entire lives is not now there when we need it. So we now are understanding our life in a different context. We're understanding, oh, I'm not bad. The world is just not made for people like me, but I'm allowed to listen to my experience and I'm allowed to make changes to make myself more comfortable. I'm allowed to accommodate myself. I'm allowed to not do stuff that is like completely well over my capacity. But in doing that, we're trying to come back to a place of listening to ourselves, which I think for a lot of autistic people, particularly high masking ones, is not something that we have trained ourselves or have been trained by the world to do ever. So like the idea that that would be easy now is a little bit silly. Fundamentally, what's happening is we're having sensory input from the world or social input or whatever. We're having data come in. We're having an instinctive gut instinct about it, and we suppress it because we don't want to look like that is what our instinct is. And so for so many years, we have this like deeply trained and ingrained self-distrust of having your natural reaction to something and having your natural way that you would respond to something, your natural feeling about it, your gut instinct about, oh, I don't like this. The immediate suppression, don't let that be seen. Shut that shit down. Don't talk about that. Don't look like you're in distress. Make sure that your face is still smiling. Make sure you're still functioning socially. Oh, did you catch that thing that that person said? Make sure that your mouth says something to acknowledge that they just told you something about their day. The self-suppression and autopilot performative like functioning is so deeply ingrained at like a foundational level for those of us who are high masking and diagnosed in adulthood that I think we have to fundamentally have a little bit of self-compassion for ourselves, because that is not going to be an easy thing to just undo. It's something that I try to remind myself now when I'm in a social situation and I'm fucking freaking out and trying not to look like I'm freaking out and feeling like I have more chainsaws in the air that I'm juggling more than I ever have before. That feeling does feel worse than I have ever felt in a social situation before. And it is partly because my system is built on not listening to myself and on not trusting the information that I fundamentally know about how I feel in this situation. And while those parts of myself are pretty harsh in trying to get what they feel like is important to be accomplished, while they're trying to get those things done, they're pretty fucking mean. They're pretty hard to be around, to be honest. But they are fundamentally trying to protect me from something that they feel so survival level scared of having be seen about me. Surprise, surprise, it always kind of comes back around to listening to myself. I've been on the people pleaser in remission journey for like the last few years, and I feel like that was kind of the thing that ultimately let my autism become a conversation that I had with myself. And it started with realizing all of the places, really my entire life, like it was just kind of 24/7, but realizing all of the little places where I didn't listen to myself and where I shut myself down and where I wasn't allowing myself to have like a seat at the table in my own life. Yeah. So I don't really know how to wrap this up now. I hope this has been remotely useful to anybody watching this, and if it has, I would love to hear more of your experience if you want to share, because this has taken a little bit for me to make. I've had to go through many minutes of me like talking nonsense into the camera to try and find the couple places where I was actually saying something that made sense. And I did all of that because I fundamentally just want somebody to go, I understand what you're saying and I relate to it. So if you understand what I'm saying and you relate to it remotely, please do say that, so I don't just feel like I'm yelling into the void. Yeah, I'll see you around. Or not, I don't know. Okay, bye.